Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and obviously we're in an event. So, I am currently in the Viking Department. Until you get to here, and then it becomes Romano-Celt, which means the Romans and the Celtic people who lived in Great Britain. So, talking about the Viking section, first of all, we have bead swags, which is what you would have worn women would have worn between their brooches, as a sign. It's just bling. It's bling, and the Arab traders who were trading up to the Vikings commented that they were willing to spend large sums of money for beads because it was a big deal to them. They had a hard time getting beads, and they loved them. I make the beads, I make the cast pieces, I also make the needle cases and toiletry sets. Needles are a big deal because you don't have sewing machines, you don't have Targets or Walmarts or any place else where you can buy your clothes. If you are a mere mortal and not somebody of super high status, you do not have a tailor that you can go to, you need to sew your own clothes. So you would have taken your needles, you would have stuck them into a piece of wool fabric, rolled the fabric, and stuck it in here. And that was worn on your brooches, or on they call a utility brooch, which is another type of brooch you can wear on the front of your outfit. Anglo-Saxon women sometimes wore them off their belts, but it's a way of keeping track of something which is a very precious commodity, because making needles by hand is not simple. If you were lucky, you had iron needles, and the lanolin in your wool would have helped to keep your needles from rusting as quickly. If you were not as lucky, you were thrilled to have bronze needles, which need to be sharpened more often. Modernly, our needles are steel, and we're very spoiled. We simply pop over to Joann's or some other location and we pick up big packs of them. But most women would have been thrilled to have owned one or two in the old days, so it was a big deal. These are toiletry sets, and I believe I have done at least one show on how to make these. You have a pick, which can be used for a toothpick and cleaning fingernails. You have an ear spoon, which is for cleaning earwax, because earwax was period, but Q-tips are not. And you have a pair of tweezers, which is good for anything from splinters to errant hairs to anything you need. And any respectable person post-Viking post-Rome would have had these. The Romans spread this concept throughout the Roman Empire, and if you've ever seen a picture of how much of Europe and Central Asia and every place else was owned by the Romans at some point, ruled by them, I should say, not owned by them, although I'm sure they felt they owned it. It was kind of their attitude. They spread the concept of the toiletry set. This is a style that would have been worn by both Anglo-Saxons and Vikings. The Anglo-Saxon women often wore them on their belt on a string, or the men would have carried them in a belt pouch. The Viking women tended to wear them on a chain or a string off of their brooches. So there's a very popular item, and they're kind of fun. They actually are useful. I actually make my tweezers so that they work and stuff like that, and that always surprises some people, but I'm like, why would I make tweezers that don't work? I mean, people use them. You're camping and you get a splinter and you can pull out the splinter with your tweezers. Okay. So it's kind of fun. Everything else here is pretty much decorative. We have Valkyries, which are from Sweden. These are all from the Swedish National Museum database, and these are a picture of the original ones, and I carved them in wax, and I make them in both bronze and in sterling. For the chains on these items, I actually make the links for these. So I have a specific setup. I suppose I should show it sometime in the studio when I'm home. That would allow me to cut different diameter rings. You can also buy setups that will allow you to cut different shape rings, like ovals and stuff like that. Most of the rings that were used by the Vikings, not all, but most, were round. So I just keep it simple, don't get too carried away. And I make a gazillion rings. I make them in all different sizes. You can see these chains here are also made out of round rings, and I cut those too. And I normally cut about a pound of metal at a time, because if I'm going to set up the system and risk life and limb to cut the rings, I'm going to do it all at once. But I have I done a show on how to actually open and close rings? I don't remember. Okay, I'll have to do that. There's some misconceptions modernly among people who don't normally do jewelry about how to open and close rings. It's not hard, but I'll do a video on that, because it's important to understand how to do it, because you can get a much neater thing. Now, my rings are cut. They are not used with, it's cut with a saw, so you have extremely tight rings that sometimes it's even hard to find where they've been joined, because they're so tight. And that's the point for me, because that makes a nice smooth chain. It doesn't catch on your clothes, and it just looks nicer. They are not soldered. I can solder them, but to be honest, most of the period ones were not soldered. The only things that we see that are soldered are gold and things that are used, the rings that are used for chainmail are riveted. So the concept that we have modernly of using unriveted rings to make chainmail is not particularly accurate. Any good chainmail in period would have been riveted, and that's just an amazing process. I've seen it up close, and you're sitting there thinking, there's a gazillion rivets on that. That's really quite the project, because every single ring has to be bent all the way around, the two ends are flattened, a hole is punched through, a rivet is inserted, and then it's hammered to be riveted. So it's a lot of work. Not my idea of a good time. But here we are, and I hope you enjoyed that. We also have Thor's hammers of various sizes and shapes, pewter ones, bronze ones, silver ones over here, and here's where I get into some specialties. This one is a specific design that came out of Norway, and this one is a specific design that came out of Henneby. So it's fun to actually cast the pieces and put the exact patterns that were stamped on them by the original people onto them and make them available. And that's what I do. So, hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because obviously we've got lots more going on. So, bye. Oh, and keep brainstorming, because we obviously do.